Hello my loves, I'm Susika, and in today's episode I'm going to make an autumn-inspired sunflower fairy. The base doll is an After High doll. After soaking the head in hot water for a few minutes, I gently remove the head from the doll's neck pack. I then remove glue and hair roots from inside the doll's head. Then I use pure acetone to remove the printed on face. I then wash the doll's head and body in clean water and soap. Once the head has dried, I reroot the scalp with synthetic doll hair in a rich brown. Once I am done rerooting, I cover the hair roots inside the doll's head with thick glue. I use a brush for this. I then let the glue fully dry. This can take up to 2 days. I prepare the doll's body with 2 layers of Mr. Super Clear Sealant spray. I then add pastels to her joints and to her skin. Once I am done adding pastels, I add another layer of sealant. Next, I am going to work on the doll's dress. I make an underskirt with a white tulle trim. Then I cut a strip of felt and add it to the doll's waist. I then add autumn leaves to the felt strip and let the glue fully dry. I add a leaf to each side of the doll's dress. Next, I take a sunflower apart and cut the petals into pieces. I then add the petals to the doll's dress with glue. I add the petals in layers. For her top, I am going to use one singular petal. Next, I color resin flower charms with acrylic paint. I want them to look like tiny sunflowers. I let the paint fully dry. Then I add a ribbon to the doll's waist to cover the edges of the petals. I really love these autumn colors. Next, I add the sunflower charms to the doll's dress with glue. I think the tiny sunflowers are looking very cute. I add a ribbon and a belt to the doll's waist, and then I make a tiny choker with a ribbon and a sunflower charm. And this is the finished dress. I added shoes and bracelets. Next, I take a deco butterfly apart, and then I add the butterfly's wings to the doll's back with some glue, because the fairy needs wings. I cover the middle of the wings with a petal. Next, I add some shimmer to the doll's skin and to her dress with golden acrylic paint. I let the paint fully dry. Now I am going to work on the doll's face up. I have prepared the doll's face with 2 layers of Mr. Super Clear UV Cut Flat Sealant Spray. I add red-orange pastels to her forehead, chin, nose and cheeks. You can spread the pastels with a clean finger. I use the same red pastels that I used to shade her body. Here I'm adding pastels to her lips. I remove excess pastel powder with a kneaded eraser. I'm giving the doll orange eyeshadow. I seal this face with another layer of Mr. Super Clear Sealant Spray. I always let each sealant layer dry for 15 minutes. Here I'm adding reds of pastels to her lips. I add some more pastels to her cheeks and forehead. Remember, doll customization is all about layers. You will need multiple layers of pigment for the colors to show. I'm using an eyeshadow applier for this. I seal the face up once more with sealant spray. Now I am sketching the eyes with a white watercolor pencil. I color the corners of her lips with a red watercolor pencil. I color the sclera in white. Here I am sketching the eyebrows. I use a brown watercolor pencil for this. I outline the eyes with a brown watercolor pencil. I add some more white to the eyes. The eyebrows are not even, so I remove the right eyebrow with a wet brush. I color the lip line in brown. I then darken the corners of her mouth with a brown watercolor pencil. I really like to make gradient lips. I draw the waterline in red. I add another sealant layer. Next, I sketch the iris. I add some more white to the sclera. I work some more on her lips. I want her lips to have dark corners and to be lighter in the middle. Here I add brown to her iris. I add another layer of sealant spray. Here I sketch the pupils in black. I color the iris in brown. I darken the lash line with black. Always use black last. I work some more on her lips. I add brown soft pastels to the corners of her eyes to give her face some more depth. I seal the face up with another layer of sealant spray. Here I'm adding dots of metallic watercolor to her iris. I really like the effect that metallic watercolors give to a doll face. Small mistakes with watercolor pencils can easily be fixed with a wet brush. You can use acrylics for face-up, but I do not recommend it, as mistakes with acrylic paint are difficult to fix. Here I draw the eyelid crease. I add some more white to the sclera. I outline the iris with a black watercolor pencil. I add more pigment to the pupils. I darken the lash line with black. Next, I draw the lashes. I use a light brown for this. I add some highlights with a white watercolor pencil. Next, I am drawing swirls and leaves onto the doll's face. I use yellow for my sketch. I seal the face up once more. Next, I wet the tip of my white watercolor pencil and draw the catch lines. I draw white eyelashes with a nail art brush. I'm using white watercolor for this. Next, I take golden watercolor paint and paint over my sketch. I think the swirls and the leaves look very pretty. I let the watercolor fully dry. And once the watercolor has fully dried, I add 2 final layers of Mr. Super Clear Sealant Spray. This is the finished face up. I think it's very beautiful. Now I heat the neck hole in the doll's head with a blow dryer and reattach the head to the doll's neck pack. Lastly, I style the hair. I'm doing a simple hairstyle for my doll. I really like this doll hair that I used. I added bead to the hair. Next, I make a little purse for my sunflower fairy. I take 2 sunflower clips apart, then I cut a stripe of felt and attach it to the charms with hot glue, and then I add a little chain and the purse is all done. This is the finished doll, my sunflower fairy. I named her Himawari. She has a golden wand in her hair. I think this doll turned out beautiful. I really like my little autumn fairy. I think her sunflower dress turned out very beautiful. I really like this color combination and the golden details I painted on her face. How do you like my sunflower fairy? Tell me in the comments. I think my sunflower fairy turned out very beautiful. I especially love her color combination. And she has a very friendly face. Stay safe and be creative.